Hi, welcome to Wisdom for Menopause and Beyond. And we're Anne and Alison, and we have resources on our website, which you'll find in the links about courses for and resources for women, men, and organisations around menopause. But we're also talking about midlife and beyond, what actually happens.
Wisdom for midlife. At midlife. So today we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about choices and opportunities that kind of happen uniquely at this age, and you're going to talk about lady gardeners.
Well, that's true. Went to the theatre. We went to the theatre together, which was great because there was something, it's called In the Lady Garden. So what we found interesting, and why I was interested about this, is because the company is called The Lady Gardeners, and they say it's made up of 3 women over 60. So one is the writer, one is the director, one is the actor. So there's the 3 of them doing that. And what I quite liked about it, in their programme, they talk about the fact that this particular show has had support from a number of different theatres, and they're going to get to take it to the Edinburgh Fringe this year. So if you're in Edinburgh this August, look out for In the Lady Garden, because that's where it's going to be.
It, you'll think, oh.
I know. It says, never in our wildest dreams do we expect to be making our Edinburgh Fringe debut at our time of life. So what they're saying is, and also because importantly, the story is about a woman who's supposed to be 69 and she's looking back over her life and all the rest of it. So they're also saying that you don't often get a narrative. You don't get on, there's not often a lot of plays out there that are about women at this age, older women, and it's kind of, you probably do get stuff, you've got good old King Lear. I mean, there's an older bloke, but I mean, there are some things about older people, but you don't actually see older women as the main protagonist of them. But unless it's Maggie Smith.
Oh, there's another one that does Shakespeare as well.
That's right, yeah.
But there's the 2.
Yeah.
But I actually was, as much as it was great, we kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But it was 69, the writer, I think is 69, I think.
Don't know. They're all over 60.
But they're over 60. But it was that opportunity that obviously had been her dream, that she'd worked kind of around and about in the creative industry.
Yeah.
But this dream of bringing this group together at an age where you think, does it really matter? Do I really need to do this? Or would I love to do this?
Yeah.
And I think that was just lovely that they all got that connection in that spirit. But really, this is what I'd like to do. And you know what? If it all fails,
and it hasn't, and I think it was good, and I think that it was interesting because it was looking at, the idea was this woman was looking back at her life and thinking what would have happened if she hadn't
done certain things
and kind of got pregnant early on and things like that. So what would have happened to her life, and then what did happen to her life, and how did she feel about that now, and then what was she doing now? So it was, and how did things change, at the age of 69, which they do in the play. And we're not going to tell you because we don't want to spoil it. No. But it was quite interesting. So she'd kind of lived this life up to that point, and then things changed and she went forward in a very different way. So I kind of thought that was quite a good part of the play.
The other thing I picked up from that was very much the living in the present.
Yeah.
So whatever had happened to her, whatever had been done to her, whatever you could hold as a wound was kind of put down at this age.
Yeah.
And we
don't have to carry that one around.
Don't have to carry that around.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about it before, because as life gets increasingly more precious, it's increasingly more important that we only carry the things we want to carry. Yeah. And it's like, do I want to carry resentment and grief? And if you can honestly say yes, I do, you think, well, carry on. but you kind of and I think it was portrayed, I think, as in the present when I find my peace.
Yeah.
And I just think, well, you know what, I did do these things that led me to this point.
Yeah.
It was okay, it was a turnout, it was a play, it's not a true story, but it is certainly a reflection of many parts of a real life, if you like, from many people that have come into that character.
Yeah. And the other thing I think is, because we often talk about how at midlife, menopause and beyond, is creativity is very, very important at this stage, that when you're not kind of spending all your energy looking after other people, having that kind of hormonal monthly excitement, all of that stuff going on, you have got that opportunity and you can do things for yourself. And, myself, I always say, in my 40s, I started belly dancing, and my 50s, I started on putting artistic, exhibitions, in my 60s, I did a PhD. So it was like, so all of those things become possible because you're not kind of doing that same hormonal thing.
Yeah, and
you are looking at this and you're doing. So I think creativity is an important part of that midlife process. And the fact that these women have got together in their 60s and they've created a new thing and they're doing this for the first time at Edinburgh. So that's really good. Don't write yourself off.
No, and there's another small aspect which I think is important. It's not just because we have time, because perhaps work has changed, our children and things. It isn't that. It's we have changed. And I was talking to somebody just today that said, particular person, they'd always felt very appeasing towards them. They felt a duty to she almost said, I think I've been a bit of an enabler on somebody's bad, like the way they're behaving, on the way that they're have mood swings, they won't talk for several days and things like that. And she just said, oh, I just had it. And I just thought, I'm telling them that I'm not putting up with that bit, and they can, mend their ways or change and have So she said, and then I did it 4 days later to the same person. And she said, it just feels good. That was what I would also call creativity, because we talked about the lady forgiveness and because the change in hormones means my real self is coming out, and that might be an artist, it might be a writer, it might be the way that I'm not going to enable your moody behavior anymore. I was talking to somebody who she does some very, very interesting work with teenagers, troubled teenagers, and she's very successful because she can sort of think very laterally. And she said, oh, I'm not in the least bit creative, I can't draw, I can't paint. And I went, but look at what you're doing in your intellectual life. Is you're not following a series of tick boxes, you're thinking your way across and round and being the most successful helper for young people. And she went, oh yes. So I think it's
how do you classify creativity?
But I think creativity is coming into your new space and creating new from what you're bringing to today.
So I think it's in whatever area of your life you decide to, whether it is in the arts, like these women did, or whether it is in your relationships, and whether you decide, I'm just not going to take that shit anymore. And interestingly enough, I had a conversation with somebody at the weekend where their sister-in-law had come round, and these people were getting married, and the sister-in-law, just as they were about to leave to go to to go and get married, this woman was kind of going around the house slamming doors and being upset because it wasn't all about her. And actually you're going, actually it's not all about you today. But it was like, she said that they both said to her, well, you know what, if you and I think they kind of had that, I know she did, and I know her husband had it with his sister, and said, well, if you're not, are you going to change? We don't want you to have this behavior in our house. You're in our house, don't behave in this way. And she went, oh God, sorry. And she said, well, can you guarantee that you're not going to do that? And she said, well, I don't think I can. And she said, well, then find an Airbnb actually next time you come over, because you're not really welcome in our house anymore.
That's really
and I was like, okay, great. And having that conversation, that other people in their family had enabled this person, who'd apparently, they'd gone away for 3 days, and when they got back, they'd been staying in the house, and the house was trashed. And they'd spoken to his mother, and she said, well, we just get a bit scared of her, and she just kind of has a thing of, but you are enabling this person to trash somebody else's house, and you've come there to their house, and you're celebrating their wedding, and you've just trashed their house. And you're going, that's just not acceptable. This is not a person who's 5.
No.
And so it is about that, do you know what, I'm not going to take that crap anymore. So whatever it is, taking those opportunities to, and we've talked about this before about ripping up the rule book, but yes, it's almost like, what are the things I would just like to put down now? And what are the things I'd like to take up and try for the first time?
And if it is something like resentment, you're free to do that for over there. But I can tell you, when you put that down, you'll suddenly have a lot more space for doing interesting things instead.
So a lot more space for doing interesting things instead. Great.